I've always been drawn to stories, not just the ones in books, but the ones that live in other people. The stories that shape who we are, that tell us where we come from, that fill in the gaps when history is erased. As a child, I wasn't the type to have my head buried in a book. Instead, I was always listening, soaking in the world around me, or, as my family might say, always sticking my nose in grown folks' business. But I wasn't just being nosy, I promise. I wanted to understand the voices of the people around me, to understand their lives, their histories, and their truths. Through theirs, I began to understand my own. Who was I? Who were my ancestors? And what did it mean to exist in this world? With every story I encountered, my heart grew bigger, my world more expansive, and I learned that the most powerful stories aren't just written down. They are lived, spoken, and passed from generation to generation. So allow me to tell you mine. First, let me take you to a place called Cottonville, a small community just an hour outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. A community whose history is reflected in its name. There, my ancestors were once enslaved, and once freed, they cultivated the land that still holds our family's legacy today. It was on this land that I played with my cousins, celebrated family reunions, and listened to my great aunts tell the story of our family's history. Through them, I learned that to orate our stories, to put our truths on paper, is an act of liberation. For my family, storytelling wasn't just entertainment. It was resistance. It was survival. It was ensuring that our narratives would not be erased. As I grew older, I saw how stories didn't just connect us to the past, but they shaped the present. As a teenager, I witnessed the waves of protest journalism that emerged in response to police brutality. Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. Human lives turned into headlines, their full narratives far too often lost. I saw how storytelling and journalism were so deeply tied to justice. And this understanding led me to the power of Black and marginalized student media, to the Nubian Message, NC State's first and only newspaper for Black and marginalized students. Over 30 years ago, long before I ever stepped foot on this campus, Black students at NC State faced a moment that forced them to demand a voice for themselves. It was September 25th, 1992. And just 2 days earlier, the university's primary student newspaper had continued its publication of a series of racist opinion pieces that included racial slurs and attacks on Black students. The articles, written by white student writers, mocked demands for a freestanding African American cultural center by students at UNC Chapel Hill and at NC State. The writers referred to protesters and members of the Black Awareness Council as Ku Klux Blacks, a bunch of terrorists, and even went so far as to suggest the establishment of a white trash center in response. These weren't just offensive remarks. They were an intentional silencing of Black students, a message that their lives, their voices, and their experiences did not belong on this campus. In my conversations with alumni, I learned that if it wasn't about sports or crime, Black voices were rarely present in student media. But luckily, silence was never an option. On September 25th, over 200 students gathered at the Brickyard of NC State and lit a fire and burned every copy of the newspaper they could find. In the middle of that fire, student leader Greg Washington emerged before the crowd and stated, "We need a Black paper on this campus. This is not separationist. This paper will give us a voice. And out of that fire, 30 days later, the Nubian Message was born. In his first letter from the editor, Tony Williamson, our first editor-in-chief, wrote, "The Nubian Message has been created to represent the African American community at NCSU totally, truthfully, and faithfully." This wasn't just a statement. It was a declaration, a commitment that Black students at NC State would no longer wait for others to tell their stories. However, the first issues were printed with the help of North Carolina Central University, and years later, the Nubian Message would finally be integrated into NC State's student media department. It wasn't the first or last of its kind. Across the nation, Black student publications were emerging out of the same sense of urgency. At UNC Chapel Hill, students founded Black Ink when the Daily Tar Heel failed them. At the University of Maryland, it was the Black Explosion. At Ohio State, our choking times. And of course, many HBCUs had long established their own publications, including the Hilltop at Howard University and the Register at North Carolina A&T. Young Black activists were using journalism not just as a means to tell their stories, but as acts of protest. This wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. These newspapers built the foundation of Black student journalism as we know it today. When I first entered college, I didn't know this history. I was just a girl looking for a voice, and the Nubian Message was calling me. When I first walked into the newsroom, it wasn't filled with noise or chaos. There were no towering stacks of paper, no reporters rushing in and out. It was quiet, but not empty. It was full in a different way. Every person in that room had chosen to be there, and not because it was easy. Joining the Nubian Message or any student organization dedicated to uplifting and inspiring Black and marginalized people is never easy. Once you join, you're not just a writer or a designer. You become a part of its very foundation. You carry its history, its purpose, and its fight. You carry the legacy of the students, activists, and even ancestors who paved the way. The weight is heavy, but we carry it anyway because we know what happens when our voices go unheard. As a writer, I learned that it wasn't just about reporting. It was about community, about listening, about telling the stories no one else would. I interviewed people who had never been asked to share their experiences before. And every time I turned in a new piece, I felt it. That same feeling I had as a child, listening to my great aunts tell the story of our family's history. This matters. The Nubian Message remains a testament to the power of Black student journalism. It was born out of protest, out of a necessity, out of a refusal to be silenced. It is a promise that our voices will be shared totally, truthfully, and faithfully. And now, I am blessed to stand before you as the editor-in-chief of the 33rd volume of the Nubian Message. Thank you. Thank you. As editor-in-chief, I work alongside a dedicated team of student journalists, photographers, and designers to curate more than just a newspaper. It's a megaphone for student voices that are reshaping conversations about community, justice, and equality. We tell the stories no one else will. In just this past year, we've dedicated entire issues to crucial topics that mainstream media often overlooks. We've honored Native Heritage Month by highlighting students right here on our campus. We've covered how they are affected by the lack of federal funding for their tribes and the often overlooked missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis. We've provided a platform for Latinx students who are here at NC State building legacies. We celebrate faculty and staff who, through their existence, create spaces where students can thrive. We don't just report the news. We bear witness. We document the realities, the struggles, and the triumphs of marginalized communities. We tell the stories of what it means to be Black in the classroom, to navigate interracial relationships, and yes, sometimes we even talk about the comeback of jorts or Big Back America, because our experiences are not a monolith. Throughout it all, we have remained unapologetically committed to the truth. Most recently, we were the first news outlet to cover the closure of NC State's Black Male Initiative, Native Space, and pre-college programs for high school minority students in response to widespread DEI cuts. We tell the truth, not the version of the truth that makes people comfortable, but the truth as it is. Leading this paper, being a part of its legacy, has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my entire life. It's a place where I've laughed so hard I've cried, where I've cried so hard I've laughed, where I learned how to lead, how to speak up, and how to never back down when the truth needs to be told. But it's also not an easy job. It's late nights and tight deadlines. It's making tough editorial calls and texting, hey, your article is late, again, at 1 a.m. It's fighting for funding, for resources, for the spaces to tell our stories, all while being a student. And some days, it's wondering if anyone even realizes how important this work is. But then, something happens. A student stops you on campus and says, hey, I read your article and it made me feel seen. And in their eyes, you see more than just recognition. You see appreciation, validation, the quiet relief of knowing they are not alone. In these moments, you remember, this is why we do it. As editor-in-chief, I've seen firsthand the importance of Black and marginalized media. Throughout history, we have been at the forefronts of movements of change. From the civil rights movement to the fight against apartheid to the student-led protests of our times, we expose injustice and mobilize action. And yet, we are often heavily criticized. We are dismissed as inexperienced, biased, separationist, niche. It's as if covering the issues that most deeply affect marginalized people is somehow optional. Or as if young people should outgrow seeing the world through the lens of change. But in reality, we say what others are afraid to. As students, we are on the ground. We are in the classrooms, in the group chats, at the teach-ins, the walkouts, the protest. We are here listening to our students, to the world, and reporting about it. So here's the truth. If you care about justice, then you should be reading Black and marginalized media. Because when you focus your sense of justice on those most deeply affected by the problems of our world, you begin to understand what true justice and true journalism really is. We will always be met with the same tired questions. Is it necessary? Do we still need journalism and student media for Black and marginalized people? Do we still need the Nubian message? I ask in return, is it not only natural to seek representation for the communities you align with, whether by faith, gender, sexuality, or even something as simple as robotics club? People naturally want to see themselves reflected in the spaces they engage with. Everyone deserves to be seen and heard. As student leader Greg Washington put it, this is not separationist. We need a voice, all of us. So how can you help? It starts with something simple. Pay attention, read, support. These stories, our stories, should matter to everyone, because you can't fix a world that you refuse to see. If you take one thing from my story today, let it be this. Storytelling in journalism is how we honor those who came before us, how we uplift those beside us, and how we pave the way for those who will come after. As I prepare to graduate and pass the mantle on to the next generation, I think back to my summers in Cottonville, to the stories passed down like sacred scripture, to the feeling of knowing that our history, my family's history, is more than just a memory. It is a living testament to our resilience. That is what the Nubian message is. That is what journalism and student media for Black and marginalized people is. A testament to our resilience, a record of our existence, and a promise that we will not be erased. Over 30 years ago, students proved that where there's smoke, there's fire, and we will not let the flame die out.